Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 9th episode of the Talking Cardboard Late Night Podcast. My name is Nick from Talking Cardboard, a group of guys that love to talk about board games and sometimes actually play them. If you're listening to this episode as a podcast, please note we also have a YouTube video of the podcast that will include our faces as well as other visual content of the games we will be discussing. Now, this is actually a continuation of the 8th Talking Cardboard podcast episode due to the fact that the original recording ended up being rather long. So please check out episode 8 if you haven't already in order to better understand what you're getting yourselves into. I had a couple special guests on the episode. That is Mark and Sobhi from the Moguls Gamers, which is another board game podcast that you should definitely check out. And they recently hosted a board game convention called Moguls Con here in the Twin Cities. So we were talking about the board games that we played during that convention. So let's get back into the discussion as we continue talking about the various games we had the opportunity to finally get to the table. Okay, so the game that I'm going to be talking about is, I kind of want to say, I'm going to say kind of a classic in the hobby board gaming sphere, which is Dominant Species. This is a game that's been around now for a while, and I feel like I first heard about it 10 years ago, and it was a game that always had caught my attention because I thought I'm into war games, as I've already mentioned many times, and a combat-oriented game that involved animals just sounded really interesting to me. To be honest, I never really actually read about the game or watched videos about the game, and now, in fact, finally had the chance to play it, so I didn't exactly know what the game was like, and it's a little different than I guess what my perception was going to be of the game. But with that said, in this game, up to 6 players, I believe you can play up to, are playing as different animal species. So there's mammals, reptiles, arachnids, insects, and a couple others. They are minorly asymmetric in terms of what they do within the game. For the most part, each faction is or each animal species is pretty much playing the same, but each one has like a slightly nuanced flavor that makes them a little different than the others. And you're trying to achieve dominance over this hex-based board. What I guess makes it kind of unique is it's a action programming system where you go left to right, and it's at the core it's a action selection game. So everyone has 3 pawns that you're putting on different action spots, but then those actions are going to get resolved in the same order every single round. So you kind of have to think ahead of, well, if I know this is going to happen before this action, so I need to plan accordingly so that this action that I'm going to take later is still going to have the effect that I want it to have. And you can't necessarily know exactly what the other players are going to do with their actions, but you can kind of guess what they're going to do to try to make sure that, again, you're getting the most value out of your actions later in the game, or later in the programming step of the game. So with all that said, definitely an interesting game. I would probably play it again, but I was thinking more it was more of a combat focused game where you're like upgrading your species with different abilities, kind of like in the game Evolution, where you're adding traits to whatever animal you are. You have maybe some more asymmetry, and then you're going out and trying to take over take over the map, so to speak. And it's really not like that at all. There is mild combat. There is a action that allows you to take out a piece from one of the enemy factions or other factions, but it's really more about making sure putting your pieces in the right spaces of the board and trying to in a sense leech off the other animals, which I guess is kind of thematic. I was the arachnid, so I felt my best strategy was to try to have my spiders in as many hexes as possible, and hope that I could take advantage of each hex that I was in. And it ended up being a pretty close game. So, but thanks for the host that organized this game, because he prevented a very great teaching of the game to help all the players get into it relatively quickly. So, again, another great aspect of Moguls Con is that you have these great game teachers that have experience, teaching games. So glad I finally got to try it. Don't think I would add it to my collection, but it's still a good design of a game, and definitely I think has its merits. So that's Dominant Species.
Did anybody tackle another player, hold them to the ground, and claim dominance?
Yeah, I think house we didn't have that house rule, but I could imagine that there may be people that have that house rule in the game for Dominant
It's actually
Species.
not a house. It's not a house rule. It says in the book that that the player has to claim dominance, and it does not actually specify how
Okay.
claiming dominance must be achieved.
Fair enough. Oh, there you go. I guess I'm not condoning. So, Talking Cardboard does not condone physical violence when playing board games, but you are free to interpret that rule in Dominant Species how you see fit. All right.
Eating more chicken wings than somebody else might be considered showing dominance as well. So
Yeah, that's true. There's a
take
lot of
that as you will.
yeah.
Speaking of dominance, here comes the greatest segue ever. I got a chance to show my unbelievable dominance in dice rolling on Sunday morning. And I got the opportunity to play an absolute classic Sid Saxon game from a million years ago that was originally a Milton Bradley game, of all things. I'm talking about the classic Can't Stop. And you know what? You say what you want about
So
Milton
good.
Bradley
Such a
game.
good game.
This game is awesome. And I saw a copy of it. Somebody had brought a copy of it with them. And I was sitting with the group that morning, and Lewis Owen brought it. And I'm like, Lewis, yep, for teaching us a game, teaching my friends here a game of Can't Stop. He's like, when am I not? So we got in a game of Can't Stop. So basically, it's a push your luck. It's like Quacks of Quedlinburg that doesn't suck. Wait, did I say that out loud? I did.
Come on, Mark. All right.
So the idea is that you basically have 4 dice to roll. You're going to make 2 pairs of them. You're going to advance up the columns on that one. And of course, it's easiest to make 7s. So you got to take a lot of 7s to get up the top of that one. It only takes a couple of 2s and 12s. And what you have to do is you have to get to the top on 3 columns to win. And the first person to lock it. And once you get to the top of a column, it's locked out and nobody else can use that. The problem is if you roll something that's not available or something that one of your 3 runners isn't on, you bust and you lose all your progress that round. So I got super lucky in my first round, and my numbers were 6, 7, and 8. Almost impossible to not roll 6, 7, and 8 and 4 dice. At least one of those. So I basically pushed 3/4 of the way up the track on all 3 of them in the first turn. And then thought, well, maybe I should give somebody else a chance here. And I actually ended up skunking everybody, and I was at the top on all 3 of those before anybody else got to the top on anything. And super domination. But since then, I have been rabidly 3D printing copies of this game to one for myself and to give to friends for their birthdays and all of that. Because it's a game that everybody should have on their counter. And the
Totally.
3D printed one kind of turned out especially cool.
Yeah, this game's a classic. So this is a game that I keep in my purse, and it's just a printed piece of paper with the tracks printed on them, and then I steal these little cardboard tokens that I had laying around from another, some game that was deluxified, and I wasn't using them anymore. And my wife and I play that at anytime we're out and waiting on something. It's just awesome.
I was just gonna say I'm familiar with the name Sid Saxon from Acquire that we talked about
Acquire.
earlier, and yeah, it's cool to hear that this is another classic and that was involved with.
Yeah, really good 2-player too. Super fun.
It gets super gnarly at more than 2-player because
Yeah,
then suddenly you have
takes
multiple
forever.
people closing down different aisles, and we were playing with 4s, so the fact that I was able to skunk in a 4-player game actually for that
very fortunate. All right, so I'm going to talk about another war game. I sat down with my friend Patrick, and we cracked open a new game I got from Kickstarter from Catastrophe Games. So this is a pretty small publisher. They've done some pretty cool small games here. I know that they published Landing at Gallipoli by Joe Schmidt. It's a solo game. Joe's a phenomenal solo designer. Definitely check it out if you like solo games. And they've published some other things. I think was it Hammer of Judea or something? It was about the Maccabean revolt against the Greeks at the time. Really great system. Absolutely love that game. So, Crisis in Korea is by Sebastian Bay. Sebastian recently published the game Littoral Commander. Sebastian does teach at War College, teaches Marine, future Marine leaders, and Littoral Commander was a wonderful take on tactics in the modern era. So, really awesome game, super unique for the genre of hex and counter war games, and I highly recommend that for anyone that's interested in like modern operational war games. So anyway, I am gonna really lay on Crisis in Korea here. This game is barely playable. It is a complete mess, and neither Patrick or I had a good time playing it. I was very surprised that this game was published by Catastrophe. It seems like it wasn't proofed at all. Like the rules made no sense, and we, Patrick and I had to kind of just like, make gentlemen's agreements on what made sense between the player's aid and the rule placard. And I was very disappointed in this one, I have to say. So we kind of folded it up like I want to say 30 minutes in, and it's definitely going on my sell pile at this point. So. Sorry, Sebastian. I know you've done a lot better, and I'm looking forward to your next one.
Yeah, it's too bad. I'm looking at the Kickstarter page for it, and it looks like there was only a total of like 100 backers. 76 for the physical copy and 59 according to the Kickstarter page for the print and play. So I guess you were one of the lucky ones or unlucky ones. How'd you say that you found out about this game, Sobhi?
I just kind of keep tabs on, new war game releases.
Okay.
Through BGG and through some of my designer communities as well. So, anytime I see something interesting, I'll, especially if it's by designers I really like Sebastian, I'll be like, yeah, hey, $30, $40, why not? I want to see this happen. So
yeah.
This one I wasn't so lucky, but absolutely, next time Sebastian comes out with the game, I'll back it.
So next for me is a game from I guess a new designer called Factions Battleground, and this was we already kind of referenced this game earlier at the top of the episode. The designer of this game, Peter Ferry, was present at Moguls Con showing this game off, giving demo sessions, so I decided to take him up on a demo session of Factions Battleground. So I didn't play the full game. I played like a round, an abbreviated couple rounds of the games. But I got a decent feel of how the game flows. Basically, it's a card-based skirmish game, very similar. Well, I shouldn't say very similar, but similar to Summoner Wars, if you're familiar with that card tactical war game, where it's like a 8x8 matrix board where you're laying out different cards from your faction that represent all sorts of creatures, or depending on, I guess, what type of faction you are, humans, creatures, that sort of thing, monsters. And each faction has a very distinct feel to it. I can't remember. Gosh, I'm blanking on the fact. I want to say it was like a kind of dwarven type faction that I was playing as, and they were very dependent on physical strength. They didn't have a lot of spell any kind of monsters that had spells, and there's other factions that rely heavily on spells. And during the course of the game, you're trying to capture resource points that will give you more resources to buy more cards to put out on the board. And the winning condition is just destroying your opponent's cards. You need like 20 points of destroyed opponent cards to win, and that's the objective. To my understanding of any game of Factions Battleground. From my limited play session, I thought it was a cool idea. It definitely felt different from Summoner Wars. I think appreciate more of a system like in Summoner Wars where you're drawing, I think, 5 cards every round, so you you're kind of forced into making a decision with the cards in your hand, which makes Faction Battlegrounds different, is that you have your whole army of cards to put out on the table right away. So you kind of almost have to probably have played the game a few times to kind of understand, well, which cards do you want to put out earlier than later, because otherwise you don't really know like what card makes sense to put out. You're not really forced into any decision per se, so you could put out a really high value card right away. And does that make sense or not? I couldn't really tell you, but I do think that there's a lot of potential here with the different factions that the game comes with. I can't remember the total number that Peter said is available, and I think they're going to make additional expansions for it. So it's still a cool game, and one that I probably would like to maybe do a full playthrough to get a better understanding of how the game really feels, because like I said, I only played like a practice round against Peter, and appreciate his time teaching me the game. And definitely check out Factions Battleground if tactical card based skirmish games are up your alley, because I do think it offers different mechanisms from what I've seen out there. So, and I should also say, one thing that's a big benefit of this game was that gameplay was pretty streamlined. There's not a lot of overhead and rules complexity. Peter was able to teach me the game probably in like 5-10 minutes, and we were immediately playing. So I really appreciated that part about this game as well. So that's Factions Battleground.
Yeah, probably a surprise darling of the con, actually. I think. I mean, I did not expect that, and Peter definitely had people sitting down constantly the whole time he was there, putting in effort, and he sold a few copies. He donated a couple with an unreleased expansion as well, and super generous, great guy, and good conversation. So I definitely recommend checking it out if you like Summoner Wars or even Magic the Gathering.
Sure. Yeah. All right,
yeah,
Mark.
it was on my list of things to do to sit down and learn about it too, since I'm actually I played a lot of Magic in the past, and also kind of gave that up and now play Codex, actually, which is kind of a tower defense sort of head-to-head skirmish game. So, I think that's something that's definitely could be enjoyed by both my son and I. So we'll have to look that one up in the future. Another kind of, I'm going to stick with a couple of light games here before moving back in and finishing it up with my favorites of the weekend. One of the earliest games I played, probably the second game I had in my collection after after Acquire. The second game I bought was one called Bohnanza, which I still maintain, and I will die on the hill that is one of Uwe Rosenberg's best designs. It's one of I think it's his first game when he was still pretty young. He's gone on to do these giant box farming games, but until then he had this little bean farming game where, the whole idea is that you have a hand of cards. You cannot reorder your hand of cards for any reason. And at your turn, you always have to plant the top card, and you must plant the top card, and you may plant the second card. And you only have 2 or 3 fields, and it has to go in one of the fields that you have. If it doesn't fit, then you have to harvest one of your fields, potentially for a loss. Once you get a certain number, depending on how many beans are in there, you take some of those beans out of circulation as payment, and you go through the deck a number of times. Now, how do you make order out of this chaos? Well, you have to trade cards away. So, like, let's say you have a blue bean field and a coffee bean field, and you've got a bunch of chili beans that are in the way of your blue beans and coffee beans in your hand. Well, you got to get rid of those somehow, because if they're at the top of your hand, you got to plant them. So a lot of bartering and negotiation in this game. Hey, I got two chili beans. I'm looking for 3 blue beans and a coffee bean. Who can give them to me? And so you end up working deals wherever possible. And there's a lot of fake deals that you advertise. You're like, oh, I'm interested in a blue bean. Oh, you don't have any? Okay. Well, just to get the word out there, somebody else comes around. There's a little bit of that happens as well. And it's a super interactive, fairly challenging little game. That's just delightful to play. And so millions of copies of it, millions of expansions. You just need the base game, right? I think you can buy the base game for $15 or $20 and you'll never get sick of it. So anyway, it had been, probably 5 years since the last time I played it. And that is a crying shame, Sobhi.
Totally. So. Yeah. And honestly, I think anyone can play this game. I think it's just got tons of appeal. It's got some good decisions. Yeah, you could bring this to any lightweight game night and have a really good time. So
I don't even know that it needs to be a lightweight game night. I mean, like you said, it's universal appeal, and I know a lot of pretty heavy gamers that just, after burning their brain for a few hours on something else, will love to just throw down and, barter away their bean fields.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm just kind of referencing, right, that you can get any introductory player to play this game. So
Yeah, it sounds like you caught my attention because I'm always looking for games that I can play with my family, who again aren't big into hobby games. So if this has a low barrier of entry, that's sounds like a good thing.
This was always one of my go-to games for whenever I'd go over to like a family Thanksgiving dinner or something with people that were non-gamers. This is one of my go-tos.
All right, so I'm going to go back to trains. I'm going to talk about a train game that I've been wanting to play. So this is the new printing by Rio Grande of Colorado Midland, designed by John Borer. So this is a very ugly produced game, as are many of the new Rio Grande releases. The people that are buying these games typically don't care about that, which I agree, right? It's not very usable. You can barely fit all the cubes and the hexes that you need to. This is a cube rails game, right? So there's lots of plain cubes on a map. So, and again, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. It's a cube rails game, and we're not going to see games like this typically for us train weirdos. So anyway, Colorado Midland. It is a classic cube rail style game, kind of on the lighter end of the spectrum. In a round, you're assigned basically mining deeds into a hand, so it kind of becomes a card game, if you will. And you place these deeds around the board in the order of which potentially they might be resolved. So ultimately, you need to build trains on the map collectively with people, so it's shared incentives, and then get those cubes into those mines in order to score them before the deed is closed, right? The deed might just be closed if there's no train there and there's no other deeds being scored at the time. Well, the top 3 deeds just get closed and yours could be it. Now, if you play your cards right, you might end up with a deed that scores multiple times. So this game is about timing. It's about using your opponents in order to, capture their shared incentive with you as well. And then also it's quite a bit of luck too involved, right? Because you could end up with an absolutely horrendous hand, which happened to me, unfortunately. So Colorado Midland was an interesting experiment. And I don't say this negatively. I feel this way about a lot of cube rails games. They usually take 1 or 2 things out of like a complex train game, like with stocks and so on, and riffs on that concept. So Colorado Midland explores this idea of contracts and shared incentive route building. And I definitely respect it for, doing something relatively unique in that lighter cube rail genre. That said, I probably won't play this again. I wouldn't say it's bad by any means, but it's definitely not something that I would prioritize over other releases that I need to explore. So I appreciate that Joe went through the effort of teaching us. I did have a good time with everyone at the table, but it was a little below expectation for me. So Colorado Midland, you might like it. I definitely recommend checking it out if you're a Cube Rails fan and you have time to do it.
Yeah, I pulled up the board of that game, Sobhi, and I agree. The artwork definitely left something to be desired in that game.
So bad.
All right. So next game for me is called Kutna Hora, the City of Silver. And this is, I believe, what would be classified as a Euro game. And
I think you played more Euro games than me.
I know. I was like, this. But anyway, just looking off the BGG page, it says that it's a historical city build. This does say city building Euro game for 2 to 4 players that features a real life supply and demand experience in which every action you take has an impact on the game's dynamic economic systems. I should just read off the BGG explanations of the games because they'd always be better than me trying to fumble through what the game was like. But in essence, you're trying to build buildings and also mine for ore, and by doing so, you're as the description I just said stated, you're changing the prices of different materials that your buildings are allowing you to sell. So there's like silver, meat, or a few other different things. And when you build a building, the building that you build is providing one of those resources. And when someone else builds a different building or mines, that takes a mining building or whatever, then the price of those materials might shift up or down. And that kind of creates this interesting dynamic because on your turn you have six or seven, I think seven different double double use cards that allow you to do one of six different actions. And you have so each card can only be used for one of the two actions that's on it, and those are either you're either able to get by the rights to eventually build on something by the deed or by the schematic for a certain type of building, actually build the building, or you can do a mining action, or you can do an income action. And the income is how you're making your money, because then you finally look at all the different buildings you have and tally up the different resources they're making, or the different resources, and look at the current market prices for those resources, and then you get your money. So you kind of have to time your income action around the table, because at the start of a round, maybe you make a lot of meat, but the meat price is very low, so you might want to hold off using that income action until later in the round when hopefully it goes up. But if you really need the money, are you okay getting a bad deal on your meat because you really want to build a building? And you have to make those decisions. Overall, I'm not a big Euro gamer. I liked what this game was trying to do, but I felt the market aspect wasn't as dynamic as I would have liked it to be. It felt a little arbitrary at times. It didn't really make sense to why it would shift the way it did at times. I know this was another game I played with Hector. Hector said after the game he's probably going to sell it, so take that for what you will. I don't think I necessarily have interest in playing it again, but I appreciated what the game was trying to do. But it overall felt a little like a typical Euro game where you're taking pieces off your board, and now you get some sort of benefit because you took a piece off, and oh look, I get this now, and oh I took another piece off, oh now I get this, and you don't really understand why certain things are happening for different reasons. So that was Kutna, Hora, City of Silver from Czech Games Edition.
Glad to hear he wanted to sell that one, because that's one that's actually been on my list to play, and I saw you guys over playing that and was actually a little bit jealous. So that was kind of what led into my conversation with Hector, is just that just trying to get his impressions of it and chat about it a little bit.
Yeah, definitely hit him up. He might give you a good deal, but you might want to wait. You might want to time your ask of him at the right moment so he sells it at a good price. Anyway, what else did you play, Mark?
Sure. Just got two left on my list, and I'm going to save my favorite for last. On Sunday, this was a last of sorts too. It was the last game I played at Moguls Con, and it went till probably 15 minutes after closing time, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, on Sunday. I think people were packing up games around me and hauling stuff out as we were trying to take our last turn. This is the classic Spanish farming game La Granja. And they recently re-released that as a really beautiful deluxe edition. That's the giant box. And La Granja is a game of just trying to produce as many resources as you can. You're a farmer on the island of Majorca. You can either take those resources that you produce, wine and pigs and grain and food and so forth, and you can either bring them to market, or you can try to sell them yourself out of a market barrow and so forth. There's a million different little super power-up cards that you can combo with, and multi-use cards where you can either, when you draw a card, you can either use it as more of a field, or you can expand your farm, or you can use it as a market barrow that you can try to fulfill, or you can use the power up as one of your assistants on that. And have really enjoyed this game a lot this year. Originally came out in 2014, designed by Michael Keller and Andreas Odenthal. Recently republished by Spielworks. And so finally got a chance to play. I had a couple friends that came just the last day in the afternoon and got a chance to get in a game with them before everything closed down. And super duper enjoyed our play with it. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for Phil, our auteur of Euro games did what Phil usually does and crunched us like usual.
Yep, that's to be expected. Okay, well, so I got a couple more as well. And I think I'm going to go with a little bit of I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go with a little group entry here on trick-taking games. So I played a few trick-taking games. I have talked about Shut the Books already. So I played that again and taught some people, and it was a hit. Everyone loves this game, and I think this is going to be a classic for years to come. So don't need to say much more about Shut the Books, but just an absolutely phenomenal game. I also played a game I didn't like as much, and this is called Twinkle Starship. And this is a 2020 trick-taking game, and this is by Taiki Shinzawa, who also designed Shut the Books, so great designer, right? He just likes to riff on, some of these formulas with trick-taking, and it's just, likes to explore. So I managed to stumble on Twinkle Starship. I was really excited. That said, it was fine. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it's just not like a trick-taking game that I'm really going to latch on to and try to introduce to other groups. So the trick with Twinkle Starship, is that you have these little sticks that you get to place onto your cards in order to change the numbers, the digital numbers, to other numbers. So, and then if someone wins that trick, they get to take all of the sticks that were on that card. And then those can turn into points at the end of the round if you're able to fulfill the modified bid now that you have. So your sticks are a finite supply. Whatever sticks you have left from your hand after you place them onto cards and use them as that kind of modification currency, that's how many tricks you have to win. So it's a little weird. Very swingy is kind of what we noticed. Maybe we're just playing it wrong, but we saw scores that would swing from 0 to 30, and this didn't seem like a very friendly round-around game that you could rely on predicting things that were going to happen. So anyway, Twinkle Starship, fine game. I didn't see anything super wrong with it, but might be a little underdeveloped. The next game I have in this trick-taking subcategory is Seers Catalog. This just came out. This is by the famous trick-taking reviewer Taylor Reiner. And this is, I think the theme here is, it's kind of interesting. It's about there's a werewolf infestation, and then you have to order things out of this catalog. So I mean, like most of these games, there's no theme, right? But Seers Catalog is a bit of a interesting take on a shedding game, and you're trying to shed out, but the real twist here is that at the end of the hand, you get points based on your remaining cards. So if you shed out first, you get 0 points. That's not very good. But your opponents have the opportunity to get a lot of points or get a lot of negative points based on what's left in their hand. So it's a game about timing. You have to know when to play what. And it was actually a really good time. So I think there was a lot of skill involved in the people that did well in that. I didn't do that well, but I had a good time anyway. My friend Sherwin taught it. Loves trick-taking and shedding games, and it was great to play games with him before he moved out of state. So hats off to Sherwin. Good teach.
Yeah, that one looks pretty cool, actually. Might have to try that one sometime.
Yeah.
All right, so last for me is a game that was kind of taught towards the end of the evening since it was a shorter game. So it wasn't one that I would have otherwise really gone out of my way to try, but that's called The King is Dead. And it's a small little card game. And reading off the BGG description, the kingdom is divided. The 3 factions, the Scottish, the Welsh, and the English, vie for control. Across the sea, foreign invaders prepare to take advantage of the chaos. and players must marshal their limited resources to influence this power struggle while ensuring that the faction that rises to dominate the realm favors them above all other claimants to the throne. But really, when you're playing the game, it doesn't really feel like there's much of a theme. You're just basically trying to move cubes around a board, and there's 3 colors of cubes: blue, green, yellow, or blue, yellow, red, and every player has the exact same hand of, I want to say, like 10-ish cards, and each card moves the cubes around in a specific way, whether it's transferring one cube from one area to another, or some sort of variation of that. And once you use a card, it's gone. And every round there's a battle in one of the regions of England, and depending on which color has the most cubes there, that's the color that wins the battle. And at the end of the day, you want to kind of guess which of the 3 colors is going to win the most battles, and set yourself up to win the game that way. I explained it very poorly. I guess I'm probably talking about this game more than I deserve, because I didn't really enjoy it. I felt like I didn't really understand what I was doing, and I still ended up winning, which I feel like whenever I win a game and I don't know what I'm doing, it's a sign of a game that's, I don't know, that I don't really think is a good game, because if I don't know what I'm doing, I should be winning the game. But that's The King is Dead. It's a very light game. Some people might think it's a good one to take on a trip with them, but yeah, that was my impressions of that game.
It's a good one. It's pretty famous. It's by Pure Sylvester, who on Twitter, it says Pure Sylvester, not the designer of Inish. So there's that. It's kind of funny because he designed the game Brian Boru that came out a couple years ago.
Okay.
And a lot of people were kind of confusing him with the designer of Inish at that time. So he put that in his Twitter profile. So I think that's pretty funny.
Yeah. So sorry, the same designer of The King is Dead designed Brian Boru?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I've played Brian Boru. That game, I can understand there's some similarities a little bit in the theme, but Brian Boru, I would say I enjoyed definitely more than The King is Dead.
Okay, saving my best for last here, and this is a game that I was on a mission to get played this weekend. I'm going to grab a visual aid here quick. My favorite game of the weekend was 1890 Railways of Osaka. This is there's a group of 18XX games that just have never ever made it to the United States. They were published only in Japan. They were available as kits. Basically, the only way you could ever get one of these in the U.S. is you either pay very handsomely for the few copies that come up for sale that are kind of charmingly handmade, or you hand make one yourself. And that's how I ended up with a copy of 1890. I happened to see that there was print and play files out there for this one. I knew nothing about the game, but I didn't know anybody that had it, and I thought I'd be, super hipster and make an 18XX that nobody else had, and super overachieved on the production value on this one. And I actually kind of have a very professional looking copy of this game that nobody's ever heard of. So, and there it's been sitting on my shelf for 5 or 6 years. I was just hell bent to get this thing played on the weekend. So I managed to talk a pretty good sized crew into playing this with me. So I had Nick with me. I had Mike Carter. I had Joe D. And I had Eric Cannell all joined up to play this game of 1890. So at its core, the base rule set is 1830, which kind of most 18XXers know how to play. And before you just go, and dismiss it as being a little bit vanilla, and if I'm being honest, it's actually the core rule set is more 1889 even than it is 1830. And it's a blessing that the rule set is that easy, because this thing is positively dipped in chrome. I mean, basically we decided that most of the way through it is an effort to make this a simulation of the way that railways developed around Osaka, so that they bent 18XX rules around the actual historical events to force those historical events to happen in roughly the right order. And there's all these little sub-rules that are popped in there just to emulate some weird little nuance of actual history. Like, there's a railway that gets an extra 40 yen when it goes through this certain town because of the popularity of the baseball team there and all the people riding to, going there to see the baseball team. I mean, that's just a random rule that's there. And there's dozens of these. So there's a pretty substantial cognitive load just managing all the little bits of Chrome and events and things that happen when and how they all tie together. So it took us a while to get things set up and get through all of these rules in Chrome that seem incredibly random. And then we actually started playing it. Like most 18xx games, there's a very normal set of game end conditions, like the bank breaking or somebody going bankrupt. There's also where after you play 10 turns, it also ends. And the game started out incredibly slowly. Like, there was 3 or 4 rounds where we're all just kind of like building a piece of track, collecting a little income, and then moving along. And I could see everybody was kind of starting to nod off a little bit. It wasn't going anywhere quickly. Until I started the big national railway, the JR. The JR West can have double the number of trains. It can lay double the track. It's just this massive behemoth of a company. But the problem is it only pays out half of its money and it keeps the other half. So it should always be this just self-growing giant. And what ended up happening is there's this phenomenon in 18xx games called the train rush, where it sort of is the clock of the game. And you can actually get caught. It's, think of it as gaming musical chairs, that you always have to have a place to sit or else you're going to get shoved off. And not having the money to buy a train is the version of I don't have a chair. And some games it's pretty gentle. They don't take chairs away very often. Other times they take away half the chairs all at once. And that's what happened when the JR West came into play. Is I had $1,000. I was keeping a whole bunch every round, so I bought 4 trains, and I basically pushed it all the way from the beginner trains to the advanced trains in one turn, putting basically everybody on notice. And that just, all of a sudden, it was just a complete scrum, everybody trying to save their life and claw for air as the floor was falling out underneath them. The problem is I started that too late and with another company, and I basically ended up bankrupting my other company in the process and myself along the way in the process of trying to push everybody else off the cliff. It's one of those that, I took a run at everybody else to push them off and they ducked out of the way and I dove off myself. So anyway, it turned super wild. Instead of ending in 10 rounds, it ended up ending in 6 with my own bankruptcy. And I cannot believe how much fun it ended up being. I mean, just a ton of laughs with all the goofy sub rules in there and, how quickly the game escalated. And because of all those weird little sub rules, there's actually probably a lot of repeat play possible there and just trying to understand the optimal way to play this. Like, I think the JR really needs to get started at the beginning and you need to buy 6 2 trains right off the bat and then just go nuts on that one and, get the start of the game going really quickly. I think that's why that exists, and we kind of made a mistake by not opening it till the middle of the game. Anyway, lots of laughs. Game only took about 3 hours probably, and I think everybody had a pretty good time, and I'm excited to actually play it again in person because not available on any online platforms if you want to play it. Pretty much, you got to hang out with me.
You got to play with Mark, the coolest guy in the whole world, Mark Teskey. Well done,
Got to be hipster with my 18xx choices. So, anyway, that is 1890, published by Shinichi Takasaki. And probably the easiest way to get it, just go to Board Game Geek. And there's a very well-known artist by the name of Carthaginian, Karim Chakroun, that has redrawn a lot of artwork for different 18xx games that for some reason did this. And, finally, like 5 years after he did that, somebody finally translated the rules. So thanks to the work of many others, we were able to enjoy this for the first time.
That's awesome. When I was watching, and maybe I'm making this up, that in that no pun intended video, they were saying 1890 was a good starter-ish.
They probably were saying 1889, which
is
another Japanese-centered
Okay,
game.
yeah, then it was 1889. Thank you for clarifying.
And this draws heavily from that rule set.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it then.
That's That's a fine starter game, and we could definitely have a whole episode dedicated to what's a good starter game. So my last game, and I want to say probably the most basic game I've played in a long, long time, but one I absolutely loved, and probably like top 3 experiences of the con for me was playing Trio, aka Nana, which is a Japanese release designed by Kaya Miyano. So this game is so simple and so streamlined, and it's just like a blast. I mean, there were just laughs coming from the table the whole time. The core conceit is this is a matching and memory game. Sounds so fun, right, guys? but but actually it is. It's like Go Fish, but actually really fun. Basically, you are dealt out just this tiny deck of 36 cards to everyone at the table, and your goal is to get 3 sets of 3. That's in the base game rules. Or get the set of triple sevens. In order to do this, all you do is on your turn, you can either ask someone what their highest or lowest card is, including yourself, or you can flip one of the cards from the display that have been dealt out into the middle of the table. And everyone gets to see it. Everyone knows who has that and what the display card was, and you have to remember. So you're trying to kind of deduce where these cards are and be able to flip them faster than everyone else. So Trio, aka Nana, this game is actually super fun, and I bought a copy immediately and have already played it several times. So a total blast. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, sounds like another good kind of family weight version game like Bohnanza we talked about earlier that might be good to have for that reason too. But
oh yeah, this one's even lighter. It's a perfect family weight.
Yeah.
I'm excited to play this with my young kids, 5 and 7. Hopefully the 9-year-old likes it, but man, that kid just loves to chuck dice. So
who doesn't?
He's my D&D boy in the family. So.
Well, we'll leave it there. I think you guys even had a few other games that you played throughout Moguls Con, but that was definitely a good amount that we covered. And with that said, we will wrap things up here in this special episode of Talking Cardboard Podcast. So first, thanks again, Mark and Sobhi, for donating your time tonight to go through the Moguls Con experience. And also, thank you so much for, I didn't say this yet, but thank you for organizing Moguls Con, because as I was trying to get at earlier, there's just not a lot of opportunities in our area where people can just get together and play board games, and it's difficult to do that at a lot of even the local game stores. I don't feel that I'm aware of a lot of like regular, like large board games groups that are, trying to do what we were doing at Moguls Con. So that was just a really cool experience and a great way to meet other board gamers, because as a lot of us hobby board gamers are well aware, it's difficult to connect with others that are into the hobby as much as we are. So what better place to do that than at a board game convention where you're just playing board games for a full weekend. So with that said, any other things that either of you guys want to mention related to Moguls Con or the Moguls gamers?
Sure. First off, thank you, Nick, also too, for Nick did a lot of the hard work around aligning with publishers, for sponsors and getting donations and promotion in the crowd, among all of us. So you're very much an honorary mogul for helping us out with that one. So thank you so much for all of the work that you did to make it a successful event. And so it was awesome to actually meet you in person, and one of these times we'll actually get to game together too. And for those of you out there, love for you to check out the Gaming Moguls podcast. We typically put out an episode every 2 to 3 weeks. I think we're averaging these days. Life's a little busy for both of us, but it was founded on the pretense of, so often after a night of gaming, you end up standing around talking about the games you played for an hour and reliving those experiences and what you liked about a game and what you didn't like about a game, and what do you want to try next, and just interesting observations that you made. And honestly, we just said, hey, this is cool. Let's just hit record and do that. So if you like hearing people just bantering about games, honestly. That's our premise. And so it's just easy conversation about the kind of games we like. And we're honestly, it's, we own all the games we played. We're not sponsored by anybody. And so you're kind of getting oftentimes the unwashed opinions of what we actually think and what we actually like to play.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Mark, for that. And one thing I also didn't mention yet that I meant to at the start was, if you're interested, definitely check out the what right now was the latest Mogul Gamer podcast episode, because we talked about the games we were looking forward to playing potentially at Moguls Con, and you can compare and contrast what we were looking forward to playing and what we actually played to see how well we did, and you can find out for yourself. Yeah.
Maybe 5%.
One.
Yeah, I got one in. Well, I did.
Yeah, go ahead.
Title the episode "Wishful Thinking." So
that's true.
Definitely was wishful thinking.
And I need to now title this episode "Reality Hits" or something like that.
Love it.
Well, thanks, Mark and Sobhi, once again for your time tonight, and thank you all for listening to the Talking Cardboard podcast, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple, or you're watching the video on our YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, and continue following all of our content. And also, once again, check out the Moguls Gamers podcast, as well, as they have a much more professional sounding podcast than what you're getting here. But I'm trying my best, and hopefully we'll leverage the experience from Mark and Sobhi to make the Talking Cardboard podcast a little more professional as time goes on. So with that said, hope you guys have a great day, and also hope to have you guys listen to me soon again and not have to wait another 6 months for the next episode. So thanks, guys, for listening.